have a good group of folks. I'll start again by saying good afternoon and thank you for taking your lunchtime to join us for another episode of the Equity Series, which is part of the Equity Alliance. Community members, organizations, government agencies all get together to have what I hope are robust and educational conversations about all of the ways that we could work together to impact equity outcomes within our own community. And today we're super excited to address a topic that is one that cannot be understated, talking a little bit about unhoused community members, specifically focusing on students and their families, and doing this through a collaborative practice. But as a reminder, the Equity Alliance is all about collaboration, and our hope is to accelerate equitable change. Currently, the City of Rochester and Destination Medical Center get together for this initiative. Our commitment is aspirational, and I would like to think robust. The idea of co-creating a healthier Rochester where everyone is able to participate equitably in the design of public policy, which we know that impacts all of our programs, our processes, etc. And our purpose and goals are to deliver equitable outcomes to all of our communities all the time. So with that, I know that you saw probably these bios come through, but we're really excited to have Lida Casper, who is the coordinator of community partnerships for Rochester Public Schools. She talks about being a product of the village herself, and I'll let her explain what that means in her own words, but has done wonderful work within the Rochester Public Schools to ensure that our students who are in transition or who are facing homelessness are able to get their needs addressed, as well as Mary O'Neill, who is Associate Director of Olmsted County Housing Department, who has worked in that role for about 25 years as a social worker. So really happy to bring that collaborative expertise together to talk about how they're partnering together along with other organizations to support community members and families within our organization. I'm also joined by Wafa, who is my partner. She is moderating the chat today. So if you have any questions, reflections throughout the presentation, please feel free to go ahead and utilize that chat feature, and she'll be able to pass those questions along to us. With that, welcome to Lida, welcome to Mary. We're looking forward to better understanding more about the work that you're doing collaboratively. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that very warm and kind introduction. I always feel proud and inspired when I get to stand alongside two of my favorite people in the world, Chow Matala and Wafa Al Khalifa. So thank you so much. My name is Lida Casper. As Chow mentioned, my job title is called Coordinator of Community Partnerships. I'm super grateful to get to be here today with my colleague at Olmsted County and friend, Mary O'Neill. Really excited to get to share a little bit about some of the innovative and interesting work that we get to help support within our systems here in Rochester, Minnesota, and really working to kind of break down those barriers and those silos that have sometimes historically existed to be able to serve students and families, and in this specific case, students and families who are experiencing homelessness. Part of my role is also I serve as the Title I coordinator for Rochester Public Schools, which is funding that is intended to serve our most economically disadvantaged students in Rochester Public Schools and enhance the academic opportunities that students get to have on a daily basis. So really proud to be here. I'm going to let my colleague, Mary O'Neill, introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mary O'Neill, and as Wafa said, or Chow said, I am the Associate Director of the Housing Department at Olmsted County. My background is in social work, and in February of 2020, I brought a team of 3 social workers to the HRA, or the Housing and Redevelopment Authority at the time, because we did not have a consolidated team of addressing homelessness at Olmsted County. it was very fractured. There were people in all departments of Olmsted County working on housing. So this was our initial effort to consolidate some of the services and be a one-stop shop and have a place to go when people have questions about housing. So our team came together with the HRA in February of 2020, and you can imagine the pandemic was quite a team building experience for us, I always like to say. We did a lot of great work with our community partners, including the city library. They were instrumental in standing up the Mayo Civic Center as a day center and overnight center for people experiencing homelessness. So I look with fondness on that time, despite how challenging it was for everyone. That team has now grown to, my numbers were incorrect in my bio, it has grown to 11 individuals, and we are hiring one more. So we moved from a team of 4 to a team of 12 in just 5 short years. So this entire team's main focus is addressing homelessness in our community. I did move into the associate director role in 2023, and currently I'm overseeing at a higher level the rental assistance programs that we offer here, the property management team, and then the housing stability team. So I as well appreciate the time and the platform to share the work that we're doing, because I think it is rather innovative and unlike anything that's being done elsewhere, certainly in the state, if not the country. So thank you for having us present today.
You are welcome. And as a reminder to Lida, just to expand the screen if possible before you get started, I appreciate it.
Does that look better?
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you for the reminder. I appreciate it. So I'll just share a little bit about what our goals are today. We'll have opportunities for questions at the end, but really we want to build a shared understanding of youth and family homelessness across our community, what that looks like, how is that defined, and then really build a shared understanding about how our collaborative is addressing youth and family homelessness here in Rochester and across Olmsted County. And Mary, I'm going to ask you just to jump in anytime. I can't see you, so feel free to just jump in.
Certainly.
Our collaborative goals, so we're going to share a little bit about, I mentioned in the introduction that we have really tried we've really tried to start to break down some of those silos that have existed that have prevented the ability to really strongly collaborate together. And so what we're trying to help people understand, or I'm sorry, what our collaborative goals are really to build a strong collaborative system of supports to ensure that youth and family homelessness is brief, rare, and non-reoccurring in Rochester and in Olmsted County. So one of my favorite, those little memes that you see sometimes of how it started and how it's going. When we started this collaborative, it was really kind of just a dream. And so this is how I sort of see how it all began for us and back in 2019. And when I think about how it's going, I think it's going really well. I think we, like I said, we started with these dreams and we've really grown into a really reliable, sensible space with room identified for each of our collaborative partners in this space. And eventually, where we're going is something a little bit more robust even yet. So when we look at how it started in our collaborative back in 2019, Three Rivers Community Action got a grant. It was called Homework Starts with Home. It was a state grant. I'll never forget it. I remember Melissa Brandt came to me in the school. I was at Riverside at the time, and she said, "Hey, I have a housing navigator. How would you like to have a housing navigator on site?" And I remember thinking, like, this is a really incredible opportunity because housing is so complex and so challenging to understand, and having a person who would be on site who could help to support families who needed it, in the space with up-to-date guidance, um, you know, was kind of wild at that time. We immediately saw success, and so the idea was that we were going to expand the model. And Mary, if you want to add anything to that.
Yes, I will. Three Rivers at that time partnered with the Olmsted County HRA on that Homework Starts with Home grant. So we, meaning the HRA, had received some funding to offer rental assistance in addition to the navigator that Three Rivers was able to employ. So it was a nice collaborative effort in tying some pretty intensive service from the navigator along with rental assistance for households who were certainly at risk, if not experiencing homelessness.
Perfect. So that's kind of how it started. I'm really proud to get to show you kind of how it's going because we've expanded this team, and this team is an incredible group um, of humans who, we say this all the time, but the expertise that this group has in the specific areas that they are working within is really, really powerful. And so we've got people from Olmsted County, we've got people from Three Rivers, we've got an AmeriCorps member. We have, of course, our Rochester Public Schools has our McKinney-Vento liaison. We've added an eviction prevention specialist, Shay Nichols. We'll get to share a little bit more about that, but missing in this photo is Tyler, our Goodwill Easter Seals employment navigator. But really just proud of the people that we get to work directly with, and proud of the work that the people you see in these photos are doing every single day to ensure that students and families have connections and access to safe and stable housing. Mary, would you add anything?
No, these are phenomenal people. That's all I'll say to that.
It's a privilege to get to work alongside them. Well, Mary and I will both share kind of the definition of homelessness in relation to the spaces that we exist within. So the educational definition is when a student is lacking fixed, regular, or adequate nighttime residence. I'll go a little bit further in depth into that in the next slide and in a short video, but that can be quite a broad range of, that can be quite a spectrum.
And the department, or the Housing and Urban Development Department definition through the federal government is literal homelessness, which means that an individual or a family is sleeping in a shelter, or they are sleeping in a place not meant for human habitation. So this could be a vehicle, a garage, a storage unit, things like that. The individual could also be at imminent risk of homelessness. And then people who are fleeing domestic violence would also be considered homeless, as according to the HUD definition. So you can see how these definitions actually conflict. The reason we bring this up is because through HUD, there is quite a bit of funding and rental assistance available if an individual or family household meets that particular definition. So the educational definition provides some framework within the school district to provide some really basic and needed services for students. So this could look like a family who might be couch hopping, who might be staying with family or friends when that isn't their preferred choice of housing for themselves. So it is quite different, but yet with both of them come a number of resources that we can access.
Perfect. This next slide, I'm going to share a brief video which describes a little bit more about what the McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness is. Can you still, I think something happened to can you still see?
We can still see your screen, but I don't think your slide is advancing.
Sorry, everyone. It's spinning.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay.
Yes.
And I just want to remind everyone who's with us today to utilize the chat if they have any questions or comments. Chow will read those questions later towards the end as we're trying to fix this technical issue. There we go. It's maybe moving. And we can also send the video along with the slides for everyone who's attending today as a follow-up email with all the resources that will be mentioned, if any.
I am not sure what's going on here. I'm going to restart the program.
That is completely okay. Technology is wonderful when it's working, right? Mm-hmm. And, while we're waiting for Lida to do that, Mary, are you able to comment on why that definition differs between the school definition of homelessness versus what the county or the state defines?
That is a very good question. I don't know that I have a good answer for you. These are long-standing definitions. In terms of the HUD definition, it may have to do with limited resources in terms of funding and rental assistance and wanting to prioritize those households who are most in need. So I think that is a way to just identify, those priority households who are living in situations that are just untenable. So that would be my guess. And then with the McKinney-Vento, it really is about getting students basic services so that their education is not disrupted while they're experiencing this housing instability or homelessness. So the intentions are, I think, very different, which is maybe why we see such different definitions.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That makes sense. It depends on who you're centering in your definition.
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right, Lida, back to you.
Great. Sorry for the technical difficulty.
No problem.
Okay, you can see my screen?
Yes.
Common situations? Excellent. Sorry. Okay, so Mary kind of went into this. The other thing that I'll mention about the definition is that the intent, like in terms of the school definition, it is more inclusive to include people who are experiencing homelessness and are doubled up. So staying with friends or family, they could be staying in shelters, which you may or may not know that Family Promise is the family shelter has expanded there. Really incredible opportunity. If you haven't learned about Family Promise, if you haven't seen it, you should definitely check out that website. Sometimes families are staying in hotels or motels. This could look like, sometimes families potentially are staying in their car and in a motel, but under McKinney-Vento, they would qualify by, living temporarily in a motel. And then, of course, there's the unsheltered will oftentimes learn that a family is staying in a place that's potentially uninhabitable, like a garage or potentially in their car, in spaces that aren't habitable for humans with, running water. Sometimes it's a shed. So those are some common situations. How does homelessness affect a child's education? You probably remember seeing Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I love this graphic because I think it really helps to understand that if we don't have just the very basics, um, if students don't have the very basics available to them, such as food and shelter, it's really difficult to get to to that top of that self-actualization pyramid where you're really able to engage in the wider world. Um, Homelessness can affect a child's education. Oftentimes, high mobility means chronic absenteeism. If your shelter is um, not stable, you might be sleeping late and uh, you know um, absent from school. Obviously, academic challenges when school is disrupted, that obviously happens as well. And then, of course, graduation rates, which we'll talk a little bit more about in some of the slides ahead. School instability when kids are moving around a lot, that is a challenge. Under McKinney-Vento law, we are able to, during the time a student is experiencing homelessness, or what we call in transition sometimes, um, for the time that they're experiencing homelessness, that calendar year, we can ensure that the child gets to stay at their home school, regardless of where that is in Rochester or the surrounding area. Obviously, social emotional challenges, and then there's feelings of shame or stigma that a child can feel.
And Lida, can you switch the display settings, please? Thank you.
How's that?
Perfect, so people can see it bigger. Perfect.
Is that better?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Awesome. Thank you. You guys, this is my first day on technology.
First day, and it won't be the last day. We'll have you practicing with us for the rest of the
Right.
year.
One important piece to note is that homelessness disproportionately affects our BIPOC youth. We received this data recently from the Department of Education, Minnesota Department of Education. We participated in this research study. Students who are Black, Indigenous, people of color, in the 2022-23 school year, comprised 34.3% of the statewide population, but made up 77.7% of the McKinney-Vento identified students. Homelessness among English language learners is also growing rapidly. You can see that 8.4% of students in Minnesota were English language learners, but 17.9% of McKinney-Vento students are identified EL. And then, of course, this is a significant challenge, but graduation rates are impacted when a student is experiencing homelessness. And I'll share a little bit more specific local data here in Rochester Public Schools in a future slide. So typically we would have what we call a data walk. And that data walk would, we would have posters kind of hung around the walls so that you could have a better idea, so that you could kind of walk around and look at some of the local data and have conversations. But for these purposes, we're just going to kind of share some of this data. So one really interesting statistic, and I think this speaks to what Chow mentioned as she introduced us. There's misinformation or potentially judgment around what might cause a family to be homeless, and so through our screening information, we in Rochester Public Schools, we screen families who are identified as experiencing homelessness. And we identified that 81% of Rochester Public Schools families report having an income while still experiencing homelessness. And I think the statistic that I recently read was, and Mary, you can correct me on this, but I believe it was 46% of people in Olmsted County pay more than 30% of their income toward their housing, which is a significant. So as of March 2025, RPS identified 387 students who are experiencing homelessness so far. That number will continue to rise throughout this year. And then over the course of, so those are the students who have been identified at this point, which is kind of astounding and I think is surprising to people that number of students meet the McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness. The other interesting statistic, and we'll tell you a little bit more about this in a future slide, but over the course of 1 year, this team, this Hope Collaborative team, Olmsted County, Rochester Public Schools, had started to track the number of families across the community who are at risk of eviction. And over the course of this 1 year, we learned that roughly 452 students were likely evicted, which totaled 211 families from Rochester Public Schools alone. So that's beyond just the county. That's just exclusively here in Rochester. Mary, would you add anything to that?
I would. So our housing stability team partners with Legal Assistance of Olmsted County on an eviction clinic. So they provide us with the list of evictions every week that will be occurring. And we cross-match that list because it is public information. We cross-match those households in our internal systems to see if they have social workers who are engaged with those families. And then we try to make that connection and intercede on some of those situations to prevent that eviction. So when we expanded it to RPS, they started tracking this, and it is quite astounding. And to give you some reference, we have about 20 evictions that occur every Monday in our local court. So these numbers are quite high for RPS and students impacted.
I had one more technical difficulty moment, so I'm just going to reopen this slide. Here we go. This is another interesting piece of data. I'll get my display settings right. So Rochester Public Schools also started tracking ninth grade specific data. So that first quarter of ninth grade is what this specific data is coming from. So Rochester Public Schools identified that students who are experiencing homelessness during the first quarter of their ninth grade year experience a 41% decrease in their odds of graduating high school than their housed peers. So that's a pretty powerful statistic. Conversely, and I like to see these two together, if a student participates in any school-sponsored extracurricular activity during that same time frame, first quarter of their ninth grade year, they could experience 143% increase in their odds of graduating from high school. So when we think about, sort of the protective factors, I'm always astounded. Even I've read it a million times, but I'm always astounded by the power in, that connection and what that can potentially do for a child or for a student, to increase their sense of belonging and to ensure that they have those better outcomes by graduating high school. One of the questions that people often ask is where are families staying when they're experiencing homelessness? And so Nicole Wibstead, who's our McKinney-Vento liaison, had collected some point in time data, and she did that on January 27th. And Mary can expand a little bit more about what point in time is, but basically for our purposes, we really just wanted to determine where are families staying currently at this very moment. And so at that time, we had one family who was facing eviction. We had 19 families who were living in hotels. We had 9 students who were living in a youth shelter, 5 families who were living at the women's shelter, 1 family who was living in inadequate conditions, or I think in this case it was a garage. We had a family who was living in a vehicle, and we had 95 families who were doubled up. So that definition is, living with friends, families. And then finally, we had 65 families who fortunately had been housed at that time. That's increased since we collected this data in January, but something that we definitely celebrate when a family gets housed. Anything to add?
Yeah, that point in time count is actually a requirement by HUD that we do every year. It's the last Wednesday of January every year that we do this count of all people experiencing homelessness. So this is a measure that HUD uses, has been using for many years, so we can really see the trends that occur over time. It is just, as it says, point in time. It is one night in January every year. To give you some context around that.
Thanks, Mary.
So just to get into a little bit about the collaboration and how we're working together. So Rochester Public Schools currently has their McKinney-Vento liaison. They also have a youth housing specialist. That is Connie Cohen. And as a result of that data we had collected from the eviction clinic and found that 217 families were impacted by eviction, Rochester Public Schools went ahead and hired an eviction prevention specialist. So she works directly with legal assistance of Olmsted County and the eviction clinic. She specifically identifies the families who are on the eviction clinic that also have students in RPS. And she attends those court hearings. She engages with those families to problem solve and identify how we can prevent that eviction. And what is astounding is that she has prevented evictions 60 out of 62 families as of April, I believe that should say 2025. And she has been employed in that position since the end of September of 24. So we are, 8 short months, and that impact is tremendous, you can see. Also in this collaboration is Three Rivers Community Action. They continue to receive that Homework Starts with Home navigator. So they have a navigator that is involved in this collaboration as well. And then Olmsted County, we have currently 2 social work specialists. We call them HOPE navigators. So housing outreach to promote education is what HOPE stands for. And we are currently hiring a 3rd social worker to join that team. So we are growing. And that is really based on the need that we have seen reported through that McKinney-Vento liaison and the number of referrals she receives each year. And then what we determined last year is income is so significant. Housing is such a challenge because rents are high and incomes are low. So how can we have an impact on increasing that household income so that housing can be affordable and it can be sustainable? So we partnered with Goodwill Easter Seals. They have a career navigator who sits at the table with us, and he works specifically with families that we're serving through McKinney-Vento and through this collaboration to work on career navigation. It could be going back to school to earn a degree that will eventually increase income, or it could be just starting employment for the first time, or it could be changing their career goals. So that has been very impactful as well. So we're trying to wrap services around our families that will hopefully lift them up and out of poverty so that they can sustain their housing. Because what we know is housing is really just a symptom of the bigger issue. So income seems to be really one of those bigger issues that is really hard for families.
Another way we look at this, and another way that we kind of have shared, Mary kind of gave an outline of how of all of the services that we sort of wrap around. But I like this graphic because, well, first of all, it's actually it's called multi-tiered system of support. It's not something that we just Rochester's Public Schools just made up. It is something that we use. We use this sort of model for literacy as well, and other interventions. But it's actually a public health model, and the intention of this is to show how we serve an entire population of people. And so for our team, the way we kind of describe this is we have sort of that baseline at the bottom, that universal supports for students who are identified as experiencing homelessness. The bullet points outlined below are what are required, what the schools are required to do under the McKinney-Vento law. And so we have our McKinney-Vento liaison. We have a students in transition navigator. That's Connie Cohen, who works with Nicole. And they are really kind of that front line. They are the people who are getting a referral, and then they're reaching out to the family, screening the family, kind of trying to better understand what those needs are at the moment. And sometimes it's just something as simple as immediate enrollment. Sometimes it's something as simple as we want, keeping a child at their home school, or providing transportation if that's outside of the walk boundary. That oftentimes Nicole or Connie would provide a lot of different resource referrals to the family, and each site in Rochester Public Schools has an identified key contact. Nicole has been really good she's really developed kind of the insurance that a key contact at each school exists, so that she has one core communicator to make sure that we're meeting those needs. And then of course there's support for academic success and that college and career readiness. So that's kind of that base level of support. And we say, according to this model, that works for roughly 80%, or it should work for roughly 80% of students. We also have kind of that next level of support. Mary had mentioned Goodwill Easter Seals, that job navigational support. We have an AmeriCorps Heading Home member. Her name is Leah. And then other resources, referrals. We have eviction prevention in that tier 2, and I know Nicole would love to, we've talked about moving that to almost like the base of the pyramid, or under the, beginning, because it really is prevention. So sometimes Shay's intervention with eviction prevention is actually even prior to a time that we would see a student identified in this baseline pyramid. And then finally, we have that really, if a family has multiple barriers to housing, and that could look like maybe an eviction or multiple evictions, perhaps a criminal background, other things that would prevent a student from or a family from being able to obtain housing. That could potentially, in this triage meeting that we were talking about, that could Nicole might learn that a family needs this additional intensive support and sort of make that referral right at triage so that we have an immediate warm handoff and that support. One thing I'll say is that this is a work in progress. What I like about it is that it really it helps to identify roles of each individual agency and how we work together. But I think that you know um, we we're always looking at continuous improvement and determining what gaps exist within this system. One gap that we know that we're working on right now that Mary and I are involved in is family promise, and family promise is um, the as I mentioned earlier, the expanding homeless shelter. So originally the family homeless shelter had space for about two, possibly a third family. And now we're moving into this larger building that the county owns, and it will be able to serve as many as 10 to 12 families. That's really, really been a gap in our ecosystem, and so that we're super excited that our community will have that family shelter. Anything to add, Mary?
No, I would not add anything to what you shared. So local homeless prevention aid, this was passed by the Minnesota legislature in 2021, and funding actually started in 2023. So local homeless prevention aid is actually a direct allocation to counties with the intention of preventing or addressing family and youth homelessness. So this is, if anyone is familiar with government contracts or grants, it's highly unusual to have a direct allocation. So this is very unique. And there wasn't a lot of requirements connected to local homeless prevention aid. So we do have a lot of ability to be flexible and innovative with this funding, which has been very exciting for us. So you can see the allocations that we are getting. This funding does run through 2028. So we are hoping that we'll have, we'll be able to show some impact. So this funding will continue and be ongoing beyond 2028. So the few restrictions that we do have for the funding is that it can fund new or existing family homeless prevention programs, and we must target families with school-aged children or unaccompanied youth. So unaccompanied youth is a federal definition of youth typically 16 to 24 who are no longer with their primary caregiver. And we also have to provide a connection for families to social services through either case management services or navigation. And then we also can provide rental assistance. So those are the requirements for the funding, which again is really quite broad. So that's how we've been able to be very creative with the funding we've used.
I think, Mary, we kind of went through this. I think when I had my technical difficulties, it rose to the top. So I think, do you feel like we kind of covered this one?
I would just say that some of the other ways we're using the funding is definitely to fund those social workers. We are partnering with our Family Support and Assistance Department to assist with some of the emergency assistance funding for families. We have been providing hotel vouchers because we do have a lack of family shelter in our community right now. And then we're funding that Goodwill Easter Seals, career specialist. And then we are providing rental assistance through this as well. There is a different program coming in late this year, early next year. It's a statewide rental assistance program, so we'll be able to utilize that as well to assist families.
I'll kind of go, so the way that our Rochester Public Schools programming is funded is we are funded under what's called the Title I Homeless Set Aside. So it is a specific allocation of dollars that serves students who are identified as experiencing homelessness. There's no other way we can use that money, and so that's one part of how we're funded. We also get the McKinney-Vento sub-grant. We're one of 7 school districts in the state of Minnesota who get that. And so those are kind of the funding sources that we have and that we use to fund our McKinney-Vento position and our McKinney-Vento navigator and the eviction prevention specialist. We, through the eviction prevention, it is really only possible because we have these other local resources, like Mary mentioned, local homeless prevention aid. Sometimes we can access some Salvation Army dollars. There's diversion funds that we're utilizing for court fees with that eviction prevention fund through Family Promise. And then we have some additional funds with an organization called X for Kids. So some of this data is not as current as I would like right now. I know that I can speak to, we had mentioned that we've prevented more than 60 out of 62 evictions. More than 45 families or more than 65 families have been housed. That's according to our McKinney-Vento data since July of 2024. We've determined that I think we had 40 families that had obtained employment through or had worked with our Goodwill Easter Seals. And then I know Hope Housing, we have more current data, but this was, I think, as of maybe December. Mary, do you want to say anything to this?
Yeah, so Hope navigators that are employed through Olmsted County tend to work with the families who maybe have the most barriers to housing. They might have experienced homelessness more than once in their lifetime. So there are challenges that those families face that are fairly unique. So in 2023, the Hope social workers were able to assist 28 families in obtaining permanent housing. So averaging about 42 days that they were homeless. And then those are the numbers for 2024.
And actually, can I interject 1 second? So I know that we have 40. That number 18 should say 40. That was my error. For 2024, 40 families.
Yeah.
Were still in secured housing.
And then emergency assistance, that is the amount of funding that we have put toward assisting with security deposits, back rent that needs to be owed to prevent an eviction, maybe a month of rent here and there if somebody has a crisis situation where they can't pay their rent. So you can see the amount of funding there that has gone toward those emergency assistance needs.
Mary, before we go to questions, did you want to mention anything about Any Path Home and your hopes and dreams for that?
Yeah, I sure can. I know some of you may have heard about our Any Path Home efforts. Any Path Home is a community impact framework that we have adopted in a way to address homelessness in our community. We recently hired an Any Path Home director. Her name is Stephanie Vetter. So she will be committed to this effort. And really, what we're trying to do is align. So every agency whose primary focus is addressing homelessness, we all have our own programs, we all have our own goals and things we need to attain with our funding and such. But what we're trying to do is really come together and focus on getting people housed. So our what Stephanie will be doing is really taking lead with this and bringing organizations together using data, real-time data, so we know how many people are experiencing homelessness at any given time, how many people we have helped obtain housing. And along with that comes individualized case management. So it really does take walking alongside an individual or a family to achieve stable housing. So what I would say about our HOPE collaborative with RPS is that we are already doing this type of work. We're all working together. Housing is the main goal. And we are providing that individualized case management with the family and walking alongside them. So while Any Path Home is really focused on single adults to begin with, I would say that our HOPE Collaborative is a little ahead of the game when it comes to the work we're doing around this.
Thank you, Mary. And thank you, Lida, for the presentation. And I was just going to segue and say, I think there was a question here from Nancy, who actually asked the question you just answered, Mary. Very much thinking about Any Path Home serving single adults and what is the plan in terms of transitioning to serving youth. Yeah, with a couple of minutes left, hoping to hear from folks who are participating today. If anyone has any questions or reflections that they would like to share. You can certainly utilize the chat or unmute yourself.
Joe, it's, go ahead, Al.
Oh, is there a workflow that says that somebody requires certain help? What is the workflow? What's the entryway? And then how does that request get redirected to the various resources in the coalition?
So any school staff can make a referral if they have a conversation with the student and hear from that student that they're having maybe some instability. They make a referral to the McKinney-Vento liaison, and then she in turn will call that family and try to get a better understanding of their situation. And then that will trigger for her who she makes that connection with, whether it's community resources that family needs, or if it's intensive case management that the HOPE navigators provide. We have a triage meeting every week where we talk through the households and the families and kind of help her. We consult and make some of those decisions. That referral form has also gone out to some of our community partners. So she is also getting referrals from like county social workers or some of our partner organizations, like at Salvation Army, when they see a family come in who are might have school-aged children, she would make that referral to the McKinney-Vento liaison. Does that answer your question, Al?
I think so. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
And I see that Nicole came on. Did you have a question that you wanted to share?
No, I'm just saying hi and waving. I am the McKinney-Vento liaison who's just kind of in the background here today. But your question about that, Al, yes, that referral process comes in through me. And then as a team, we make decisions about what the best fit for support and services would be.
Okay, thank you. With just a couple of minutes left, I just wanted to maybe tie this up a little bit with all of the different folks who are on this call, different organizations. One of the things that I heard that was maybe significant was the idea of working with our community members and students that are in transition is a lot of times related to income and other things that maybe we can all impact and influence. So just being really thoughtful from the different organizations that we serve, what are the things that we could do that might change outcomes for some of the students and families that we referenced today. And that might be a policy decision that you make. That might be how you fiscally support a specific organization, nonprofit. It could be evaluating your pay scales and ranges within your own organization to ensure that folks are earning a living wage. But it could also just be paying attention and making a referral, as Mary just outlined, for a family or a student that might need services. So really grateful for your time. Thank you, Lida, Mary, and your teams that do this work. And this is a presentation that will be hosted on the YouTube page, the DMC YouTube page. If there are other folks that might benefit from listening and learning from this opportunity, I think that would be something worth sharing. The other thing that I will share before we leave today, if I can get to my screen here, is the idea that there are lots of other opportunities in our community, in our city, to engage in equity-focused or related topics. So, for example, on Saturday, April 12th, the NAACP Rochester branch will be hosting a homeownership and wealth building workshop. Again, something that seems tangential to the topic that we're talking about today, but completely related. So if this would be of benefit for you to attend or to share with others, please do, as well as a certification workshop. So this applies to small businesses that might be women-owned, minority-owned, disability, veteran-owned, to get certified so that they can participate in bid process of large projects within our community. So if you know any small businesses that are not certified that might be interested, have them attend the certification workshop on Saturday, April 12th.
And for the certification workshop, it's going to be held via Zoom. So for everyone who's interested in getting the Zoom link for that, feel free to email me, Wafa Al Khalifa.
Okay, thank you, Wafa. And then, of course, this Wednesday, actually, am I saying that correctly? Next week, Wednesday, April 16th, yes, is the Real Estate Development and Investment Summit hosted by Destination Medical Center. Those that might be interested in development, thinking about future initiatives, or maybe how they would participate themselves in the growth and development of our community, please go ahead and look at this information, register to attend if at all you're able to do that. And then I already mentioned that this is available on the YouTube page, this episode along with others. A reminder that our next episode, May 14th, 2025 at noon, and we will be exploring how to equitably budget within our different organizations to make sure that a lot of the funding that we utilize is being redistributed into our local economy, and particularly from an equity lens. With that, great appreciation to all of you who attend, bigger appreciation to Lida and Mary for the information that they shared with us today. And please take whatever you learn or whatever tidbits back to your own spaces. But if you do have additional questions or reflections after you think through all of this information, reach out to Wafa and I, and we'll be sure to make sure that Mary and Lida get your questions and you get your responses. Have a great week.